Imagine finding out the passenger you drove home had been buried 2 years before you ever met her. It was the summer of 1990 in Benin City, and I was home from university, restless and bored. My father had just turned 75 that week, and for once he was in high spirits. That night I asked him for his car. To my surprise, he agreed though with one strict warning: be back before dusk. At first I intended to keep my promise. I spent hours drifting through the amusement park and wandering the zoo, savoring the rare freedom. I wasn't planning to pick up passengers. My father hated the practice we called kabubu young men like me, posing as cheap taxi drivers to make pocket money. If he caught me at it, punishment would be merciless. But just as I was ready to return home, I heard music, muffled bass, voices, laughter. A party had just ended nearby, and people spilled out onto the road searching for rides. Easy money. I told myself it would only take a few minutes, then I'd head back. That's when I saw her. She emerged from the crowd like she didn't belong to it, gracefully, striking, her beauty sharp enough to make me forget my father's warning. She leaned down to my window, her perfume drifting in with the humid night air, and asked if I could take her home. 400 naira, she offered, more than generous. I nodded, unable to resist. She slid into the seat beside me, introduced herself as Stella, and smiled. There was nothing unusual about her then, nothing but her beauty. But as I would soon learn, beauty has a way of hiding horrors. At first, the ride felt ordinary enough. Stella sat quietly, her eyes catching the glow of the streetlights as we drove through the city's winding roads. But soon she began asking me to stop once, then again, then again. Each time she would step out into the night, turn toward an empty stretch of roadside, and raise her hand as though greeting someone. Except there was no one there, just weeds, dust, and silence. The first time I thought maybe she was drunk, maybe waving at friends hidden in the darkness. The second time, unease started to curl in my stomach. By the third, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. Something about the way she smiled faintly as if responding to invisible companions made my skin prickle. I wanted to ask questions. Who are you greeting? Why are we stopping? But something in her expression silenced me. It wasn't drunken joy, not really. It was too deliberate, too rehearsed. We drove for what felt like hours. The city's neon faded behind us, and the roads narrowed into stretches of wilderness where only the moon kept watch. The more the miles passed, the heavier the air grew inside the car. My father's words echoed in my head: be back before dusk. But dusk had long since slipped away. 90 minutes into the ride, she asked me to pull over again, this time at a sharp bend in the road. I did as she asked, though every instinct screamed against it. She stepped out, her movements unnervingly graceful, and told me to wait. I'll fetch your money, she said, disappearing into the dark. I glanced around. There were no houses here, no buildings, nothing but trees and a sense of abandonment that pressed down on me like a hand on my chest. I waited 5 minutes, 10. My nerves throbbed. Finally, I grabbed my torch and stepped out, determined to ask her what was going on. That's when I saw the sign. The beam of my torch caught the letters carved into metal. Area Cemetery. Do not trespass. What would you do if you realized the passenger you'd been driving for hours had led you straight to the dead? From beyond the sign came a sound I will never forget. A laugh not joyous but guttural, rasping, a sound that belonged in the throat of something ancient. I lifted the torch, my hand trembling. Its beam landed on her. Stella was sitting atop a tombstone, her lips pulled back in a grin that no longer seemed human. And when she raised her hand to me again, it wasn't the smooth, delicate arm I'd seen before. It was shriveled, gray, the arm of the dead reaching across the world of the living. My torch slipped in my shaking hand, the beam darting across crooked headstones before falling back on her. She was still smiling wide, fixed as if savoring my horror. My body screamed to run, but my legs turned to stone. The night thickened around me, pressing into my ears until even the sound of my breath seemed distant. I tried to step backward, to retreat toward the car, but with every movement my limbs grew heavier, as though unseen hands were pulling me down. My chest tightened, my heart hammered so hard I thought it would burst. The edges of my vision began to blur, and the last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was her skeletal arm stretching toward me, the dry rattle of her laughter echoing through the cemetery. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight scorched my skin. The world was spinning. I was lying on the roadside, dust in my mouth, heat searing into me. A stranger's voice called my name, though I didn't recognize the face. A good Samaritan had found me unconscious, sprawled in the dirt like a discarded rag. He said he'd seen me lying there for hours. On my forehead lay a single crumpled note of 10 naira. A cruel payment, or maybe a mocking token left by whatever Stella truly was. I stumbled through fragments of memory, but the night was a haze of shadows and cold laughter. Nothing made sense. My father's car was gone. My head throbbed. My body felt drained, as though something had stolen more than just my strength. When I made it home, my father's face went from relief to fury. He demanded answers, but my mind was blank. I could not remember the details, only flashes of grave markers and that impossible laugh. Desperate for clarity, he took me to a local herbalist, a man known for seeing beyond what ordinary eyes could. The herbalist studied me with a gaze that felt like it peeled back my very soul. Without a word, he prepared a steaming concoction, thick, pungent, almost unbearable. He rubbed the liquid into my skin, chanting words I didn't recognize, and forced me to drink. As the bitter taste seared down my throat, fragments began to return. The drive, the stops, the cemetery sign. Stella's grin twisting into something monstrous. With every word I spoke, the herbalist's face grew darker, until finally he shook his head and told my father what neither of us wanted to hear. I had not been tricked by a living woman. I had been marked by the dead. The herbalist listened in silence as I stammered through the memories his potion had dragged out of me. Every detail I spoke, the laughter, the withered arm, the tombstones made the room feel smaller, as though the walls themselves leaned in to hear. When I finally fell quiet, trembling from exhaustion, the old man turned to my father. His voice was low, almost resigned. "Your son has crossed into the path of the dead. We must act before their grip tightens further." That evening, the three of us made our way to the cemetery. The air there was heavier than I remembered, humid yet cold, as if the earth itself breathed differently. My father clutched a small lamp while the herbalist carried his bundle of charms, herbs, and an earthen pot that reeked of smoke and bitterness. I followed, each step dragging as if the soil resisted my presence. At the edge of the burial ground, he stopped and drew lines into the dirt with chalk, muttering in a tongue I didn't understand. The flame of the lamp sputtered as though a wind had passed, though the trees around us were still. My father's hand shook when he set it down. Then we found it. A lone tomb, its stone cracked and worn, yet the name carved into it was chillingly clear. In loving memory of Miss Stella Caroa, 1949-1988. My stomach turned to ice. Every nerve screamed at me to run, but my feet locked in place. I could see her now in my mind, the way she smiled in the car, the way her laughter twisted into something unearthly in the graveyard. She had given me her name freely, and now it was carved in stone. The herbalist began his ritual. He circled the grave, shaking dried leaves that snapped like brittle bones, chanting louder with every pass. He sprinkled a foul-smelling liquid onto the earth, and smoke rose in thin, writhing tendrils. My father stood rigid, his eyes locked on the name, his lips moving in silent prayer. And me? I could hardly breathe. My chest grew heavy again, my head dizzy. A presence stirred around us, thick and suffocating, as though the graveyard itself had awakened to our trespass. From the corner of my eye, I swore I saw movement shadows slipping between the stones, watching. The herbalist pressed his hand hard to my forehead, chanting faster, forcing me to repeat words I didn't know. The ground seemed to hum beneath me as if voices whispered just under the soil. Then, as suddenly as it began, the heaviness lifted. My lungs filled. My knees buckled, but the weight was gone. The herbalist straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice was firm, though shaken. "She will not follow you now, but you must leave this place tonight." My father didn't argue. He gripped my arm and led me out of that cemetery without once looking back. We returned home in silence, the night air thick with the weight of everything I'd seen. My father's grip never loosened on my arm, as if he feared that if he let go I might slip back into the shadows that had tried to claim me. The herbalist's ritual had ended, but the echoes of that place clung to me like smoke. By morning, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. My body felt weak, as though Stella's presence had leached away more than just strength. My father decided it wasn't safe for me to stay in Benin City. He arranged for me to travel over 1,000 miles to live with my aunt, hoping that distance might sever whatever connection lingered. On the long journey, I kept staring out of the window, half expecting to see her reflection in the glass. At night, I woke drenched in sweat, hearing phantom laughter just beyond the door. Every time I would sit in the darkness, clutching my chest, wondering if Stella was still reaching for me from beneath that tombstone. At my aunt's home, I tried to rebuild normalcy. Days were quieter there, the air lighter, free from the heavy dread that hung over me in Benin. Still, the memory haunted me. I replayed it over and over, her smile in the car, the way she waved at empty fields, the chilling moment when her arm revealed what she truly was. Weeks later, my father wrote to me. He had gone back to the cemetery after speaking with the herbalist, just to be certain. The grave was real. The name was real. Stella Caroa had lived and died years before she ever climbed into my father's car. The final piece of the nightmare came later, when I gathered the courage to tell my story publicly. In 1998, a journalist reached out to me asking if it was true. My hands trembled as I typed the reply. Yes, it happened. This life is filled with mysteries we can't explain. Be kind to your neighbors. Some of us walk with memories we'll never escape. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see her. Not the beautiful woman who stepped out of that party crowd, but the thing she became, the thing that laughed from atop a tombstone, as if mocking me for ever believing she was human.